Today, I have the honor of interviewing Dr. Vilma Caban. She is an educator and a humanitarian researcher. In her story, she teaches us how to cope with rejection while powering through with resilience in order to achieve success. So here she is today with us. So Vilma, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, your humble beginnings, and how you got to today?
Well, I have to thank you for giving me this opportunity to share my narrative, my story. It's been such a great opportunity to just stop and think about that question a little bit, about where I come from, my humble beginnings. I am a New York City Lower East Side baby. Was born in the Lower East Side in Alphabet City, and for the first 2 years of my life, and then after that was relocated when my mom married again, and I moved to the Bronx, the South Bronx. So I've been, New York City girl, Bronx girl, my whole life, I would say, my young adult life. And then I raised my family up in upstate New York. And when my research journey began, I was vacillating between being a nutmegger, a Connecticut girl, being closer to family, and still coming back into New York City for love. But I'm back now in Connecticut.
And settled.
And settled. And settled. Feeling good. Feeling good about
That's
the journey.
awesome. That's good. That's good. So why don't you tell us about what aspects in your life got you to being who you are today and the accomplishments that you've actually um, been able to accomplish?
I'm going to say that it's actually two main ingredients. The first one being rejection, and the second one being resilience. And I'm going to describe rejection like a fine wine. I know you may not think of rejection as a fine wine.
Okay.
Wine.
No, I not at all.
Fine wine.
So I'm looking forward to hearing
yes,
this. Okay.
And my second ingredient, like I said, resilience, is pairing it with good cheeses. You got to pair wine with some good cheeses. So I would say the two ingredients that have been really have shaped my life are rejection and how I got through that rejection and developing the muscle of resilience to get through some of those struggles.
Okay. So why don't you tell us a little bit about some rejections in life? But before that, why don't you share about your humble beginnings? Let us know. I know you said, you're a Bronx girl. You was born in the Bronx. But why don't you share a little bit about your story?
Okay.
Because I feel like for a lot of us, our humble beginnings is what shapes us.
Yes.
You understand?
Beautiful point.
So why don't you give us a little in depth about Vilma as a youngster and.
Well, I thank you for that because I think that sometimes it's hard to go back. I think we're so caught in the present and our eyes are set in the future that you're right. It is important to take inventory and look back. And so I am the daughter of a seamstress who came from Puerto Rico at a very young age and settled in New York City. Fell in love with a radio. At the time, she didn't know he was a radio personality. He worked radio in the evening, but during the day was sold furniture. So she walked in there, and he wooed her, and then I came along. So 8 months into being in utero, my father at the time, who decided he was a Rolling Stone, that this was not for him. So my mom was alone, and so my beginning is in a Lower East Side flat with a single mother who was extremely poor and did not have a lot for her daughter. But she had her faith. And with her faith, there were many moments where she didn't even have enough to feed me. And there was one night she described that she didn't have milk. So she said a prayer and literally took 3 teaspoons of sugar and said in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit to get me through the night so she could take me to the babysitter who she couldn't pay, so that she knew she would at least have some milk for me during the morning. So that is, the beginning, sustenance. Faith was my mother's sustenance, and I believe that I have inherited that strength that comes from being not having without, but always looking forward and walking in faith. So that's my beginning. And then she met my stepfather, who at the time I didn't know was my stepfather. For the first 11 years of my life, I didn't know that, I thought he was my dad. So much later, I discovered that he was my stepfather, and that my biological father had left my mother and I.
And let me ask you, how did you find out that he was yours? Was it your mom that told you?
Well, because I was the only daughter, and there were 3 little brothers thereafter. I was my mom's kind of, I would say, advocate in the terms of speaking for her, because she didn't speak English. So she wanted to sign up my 3rd brother into, or actually my 2nd brother, into Head Start.
Okay.
And so you have to fill out forms. And that's when I realized that his last name was different than my last name. And I couldn't understand why. And I kept pressing and asking questions, and that's when she got really upset, and then much later told me why my name was different.
Okay.
So she tried to explain it that I was a palomita on an árbol, in a tree, and that
a little bird
in the tree, and that he found me and brought me home, and that palomita Vilmita was, that's how I became his daughter. So still, I did not hear the tragic story until much later, when I was about 14 years old.
Okay.
So I don't think she was ready to tell the story. I think that was it. And that is the first rejection, the rejection in utero. Yeah. So that I experienced, and seeing my mother living that rejection while raising me. So, but I think about the rejection, and I feel that it made me kind of say to myself, I'm going to prove that he made a mistake. He should not have left me. I'm a good daughter.
Yeah.
And he should not have left me. He should not have left my mother. I'm worth staying for. And so I think that's where the overachievement came in. And I just wanted to just do my best and to prove something. So that ingredient, right, of, the rejection, the resilience was, how can I make myself better? How can I make myself worthy? And who knows, maybe even silently I was hoping he would come back and see, wow, what a beautiful daughter I left behind.
Did he?
No, regrettably, I never met my father in my adult life. When I was 2 years old, my mother describes her, she describes initially when I was about 8 months or 6 months, going to him and saying that demanding to give him my last name, Caban. And he was not going to. She says, if you don't give your daughter your last name, I'm going to show up at the radio station, and voy a formar un escándalo. And
spicy Puerto Rican.
Puerto Rican. She was not going to have it, and that's all she wanted. She did not want me to be an illegitimate child.
Yeah.
I mean, she was already dealing with the shame of not being betrothed, not being married, having a child out of wedlock. So she wanted to somehow seal it with something legitimate, and that was if he gave me his last name. So, and that was it. And then when we moved away, when I was 2 years old, she went to the furniture store and told them that she got married. And my stepfather at the time, insisted that there be no communication between my biological father and myself. And so that was the last time I saw my father. I was 2.
And do you feel that did you ever want to have like a relationship with him?
For the first couple of years after I found out, honestly, like I said, around 14, I was so angry that I didn't want to know anything about him. I really came into wanting to discover this when I was like about 30 years old, 30, 31. And, at that point, my mom would start to give me more information. And so I learned that he worked with a big radio personality and who was still alive. And I reached out to that radio personality, but another form of rejection, I didn't hear anything. So I just, at that point, I just chose to be better.
Yeah.
And I decided to let it go at that point. I received the rejection as a sign that I'm not supposed to go there.
Yeah. Okay. So your mother gets married to your stepfather, and you guys are living in New York?
In New York City, in the Bronx at
Okay.
that point, in the South Bronx. And I have to say, it was a very small apartment. We had a one-bedroom apartment and raising 4 kids in a one-bedroom apartment.
Wow.
Yeah. So I never had my own room. As I was getting older, I started to, they got me a sofa bed, a convertible sofa bed, and I would sleep there. But the little brothers would still come out and hang out and just be with me. So I did not have my own bed until I went away to college. Oh. And it was a twin-size little dorm bed, and I was so happy because I had my own
space and your own space.
My own space, yeah. So, I mean, yeah, and now that I think about it, I go, wow, I did not have my own bed until I went away to college.
So, what college did you go to?
I went to State University of New York City, New Paltz. I had applied to many colleges, and here's the next level of rejection. I was rejected by many of them. My SATs were very, very low. Going to one of the worst high schools in New York City, James Monroe High School. Ironically, Colin Powell, alma mater, right? Our great Colin Powell was there, but it was at the time when I went there, I struggled, and so my SAT scores were abysmal. They were horrible. So I applied to an educational opportunity program, and I got accepted. And you had to go to their summer program to try to get a skill set, or at least to try to get some essential strategies or skills to be able to take the first 101 courses. And my mom didn't know I applied and when I got accepted, I was scared to tell her because she felt that una muchacha que no está casada, that's not married, should not be leaving the house. So I said, oh man. So I did the unthinkable. I signed up all the forms. I forged her signature. And till the very end, the last week, I tell her no other colleges have accepted me. I'm going. And I said no. And I said, well, if I don't go, then I'm going to end up staying here and getting pregnant. Is that what you want? And that's when she had like a little bit of a reality check. She says, she didn't want me to be rebellious. So she said, okay, no, you'll go. But she insisted on seeing where I was, and she insisted on me staying in an all-girls place, a place where only the girls were. And thankfully, there was only one dorm that was an all-girls dorm, and it was called Bliss Hall. No wonder why they called it Bliss Hall. But it was my bliss because I was able to have my own bed, and I was able to get away from the inner city environment.
That's awesome. And what did you... When you first applied, what did you want to go to college for?
I knew from the moment I was 8 or 9 years old that I wanted to be a teacher.
Oh, you did?
Knew it. I knew. It's amazing how I knew that. I had some great teachers that I wanted to emulate. And they were also great. They were the only figures that I saw outside of my house. I mean, when I would leave my house... the people that you interact with every day, either that or I wanted to be an air flight attendant on the rare moments we were able to get on a plane to go to Puerto Rico. So I saw them as like, these were figures that I wanted to be. So I wanted to be a teacher.
So you went to college to be a teacher?
Yes. As an education major and a minor in communications.
Minor in communication, okay. And in college, what did you do next? Well,
I hit a wall. I was doing my student teaching, and I got pregnant. And so now, at the time when I met my son's dad, I had to make a tough decision. Do I still stay on campus and be the only pregnant girl there, or do I quit? And quitting was not an option. I had to finish.
And this was how many years into college?
I was in my final year.
Oh, you were?
It's my final year. So right before student teaching, I decided that I wanted to, I had to continue. And so I would commute. We got a little beat up car, and I would commute 75 miles from New York City with an 18 credit course load to be able to finish that final semester. And I did it with the help of his dad. And I would stay on campus, but I was so ashamed that I was the only girl there that was pregnant. So I chose to just take courses Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, so that I could just stay there 3 days. And I would just literally hide out in the dorm. I didn't want to be seen. And I was all day in class. But at the end, I would commute back. And I did it. I was able to finish that semester. And then I gave birth January 5th, and Groundhog's Day, February 1st, I am in my new student teaching in the very affluent community in Rockland, New York.
Nice. What grade were you teaching?
I was student teaching first grade with just this beautiful woman who was just so charming and went to Bank Street College. And I thought, Bank Street, what, they go to banks? Their money? I didn't make the connection. And then another older woman, a seasoned teacher, 5th grade, who looked like she was ready to retire.
Yeah. Okay. And then after landing your student teaching, did you get another job?
I did, but I felt like I didn't almost make it to my student teaching because I had, the final placement was with the 5th grade teacher, and she was the one who sealed my fate. She was the one who was going to give me like a pass or fail. And she had spoken to my advisor that she was not going to, that there's no way that she can sign off on me teaching. She would say, have you heard her? And she's like, what are you talking about? She says, oh my God, I can't take it. She's going to axe the kids to death. I go, what do you mean? She can't speak. Her Bronx accent is horrible. And she could not get past it. But with the help of my advisor, who gave me some elocution classes and articulation classes, I learned how not to say axe, but to
when
ask.
you mean ask.
But that right there, that form of rejection, made me a little more self-aware about the importance of really the power of your words.
Yes.
And how if you can't get that message out, you have to anticipate what other people how they're going to receive your message. And right there, that woman had her own set of biases, her perception of me, and she could not get past who I was and how I sounded. So I learned that I had to overcome that so that I can get past that. And I finished my student teaching.
Did she sign off?
She signed off. I'm sure with the twisted arm of the advisor who said, this girl.
Yeah.
She just had a baby. She's commuting from the Bronx to our district. She's the first one in. She's the last one out.
Give her a try. Exactly.
Let her graduate.
Yeah.
And that's when I did. So I had people who advocated on my behalf, and I'm grateful for all of that.
And I think it's important too, to have those people giving you that little push and that, like, yes, you can do it. I'm counting on you. It's important because I feel that even when you're trying to accomplish a certain goal, and you just have that one person just cheering you on,
oh my gosh,
it just makes the world of a difference.
It really does.
So it's important to like look back and see like, yeah, that person is definitely
a huge role.
Exactly,
Right.
or made a huge impact on my success.
Mm-hmm.
So, what school did you end up?
So I went to Bank Street. So that wonderful little first grade teacher who inspired me. I ended up getting a job in New York City in the South Bronx, and they at the time had consultants from Bank Street College who were there to support students, inner city youth, and they had gotten a grant. And so I was a brand new teacher, and I was very fortunate. I had an amazing mentor teacher next door, and she took me under her arm, and with the help of that and the consultants at Bank Street College, they said, you should go to school here. But I thought, no, I can't. I just had a baby. I can't do it. So, but after a year teaching in that school, the politics, they smelled funny, and I didn't like it. And I did something bold. I chose to apply to a district in Westchester County. My son's godmother and a college bestie, she had applied and said, I'm going, it's like an all call, let's go. And I said, I don't think so. She said, try it. And I said, I had nothing to lose, so I went. So I'm glad I did, because I landed a wonderful position in Westchester, and I've been there it's going to be now 28 years.
Wow. And let me ask you, how was it, going through your career and dealing with having your small child? You did have your husband, right?
Well,
your
at the
then
time,
husband.
I never married. He wanted to marry, but I told him he needed to prove to himself to be a good father. And then in the long run, I wanted to see if he can prove to be a good husband. So I also had, remember we talked about our beginning, and we carry that with us. I did not see a good model of love. And so I really rejected. So, we are rejected, but we also are the ones that can reject.
Yeah.
And I rejected the notion of marriage because
based on
to
our
me,
experiences,
based on my experience, I saw it as you were locked in and you really had very limited choices. And I just didn't want to be that person. So I rejected marriage. So, but regrettably, I look back and I see, his father was, and he still is an amazing person, but I was not ready for love. I was not ready to have that. So I chose to walk away from that partnership as parents, and I decided to raise my son by myself.
You did.
And that's when I met my husband. Okay. I didn't marry him for 10 years. Again, running away from marriage. I had my running shoes on. I hear a theme, but in the end, though, we were together for 20 years.
That's awesome. So you was raising your child by yourself
for the first year of my being separated from his dad, and then I went bowling one night at the behest of a friend who said, "You gotta try this," and that's where I met him. And so, I was a kindergarten teacher, single mother, and he was a little older, settled, established, and it just worked out. So we were together, but it was a struggle for 20 years.
I think every relationship is a struggle. You just have to be dedicated to work at it.
Yeah. You do, but I realize that sometimes what we attract is when we try to make ourselves smaller, we attract a partner that might like that and wants to help you comply in making yourself smaller. So when you change the game, when you change at that point the game plan, it unsettles the power dynamics of the relationship. For me, it did not work. And so I was struggling to even get my master's, but I had to legitimize, I need to get my license. And then much later when I chose to pursue, my advanced degrees, I realized that I had to fight for that. I had to legitimize why I needed to do it.
Why did you feel that you needed to?
I had to, because he was complaining, well, you're not going to be home at 3:30, when you get out of work. Who's cooking dinner? So I fell right back into the pattern of what I was trying.
He wanted like a stay-at-home wife.
Right.
Okay.
So I repeated, without even realizing it, I was starting to fall into that cycle. So, but I'm grateful for all of that, because what that did for me was it made me fight and push. And I did not settle, at the cost of trying to seek my happiness. I never betrayed myself. And that's how I believe, my success came from, was from never signing up to be small, never signing up to say I'm not enough. But it takes a lot of self-talk to get through that, It takes a lot of resilience, a lot of bouncing back to be able to say I want this for myself. But it can be very challenging, because I can describe this almost like being in a canoe, right? And people say, life's a journey, enjoy the bends, the turns, the twists, and you hope with great anticipation. So yes, the canoe is great on a little stream where you have little small streams and bends and curves, and you're like, oh, what's on the bend? But when you go in that canoe and you come out of the stream, out of the mouth of a stream into the river where it's turbulent, that's what I've likened my experiences of rejection to be. They have been some huge waves that have come at me, that have overwhelmed me, that at times have toppled me out of my canoe. And I had a decision to make. Do I get back in that canoe and do I keep moving forward? Or do I just succumb to the weight of everything and just sink, and I refused to. I fought to get back in that canoe and to keep moving forward, and it was not always easy.
Of course. And what would you say was your motivation through getting to the point that you are in your life?
Two things. I think, like I said, my initial motivation might have been to validate who I was and what my value was. But I think the second one was to understand a little bit more about the sacrifices that my mother made when she chose to stay in, thereafter in a relationship that wasn't healthy. And I think that her decision to stay was because she wanted some stability, right, for her children. And so I have to ask myself, well, she made so many sacrifices. I have to keep moving forward and push through and make some meaning or sense out of all of this. So, like when I was knit together in my mother's womb and left, right, at 8 months, I believe that there was a purpose that was totally written for me. And, it's no coincidence that in theology you have written, your destiny is written, your name is written. But it's because what is written? Written is the spoken word that's captured. And so, I believe that, and that's why I think that what you're doing is so powerful, because you're speaking someone's story. You're speaking their truth. They're speaking their purpose. And so my purpose is to make sense out of my mom's decision, but also to see it come to fruition and realization that it wasn't in vain, that everything that she did was purposefully put in place so that I can make a difference for myself, for my family. First it starts small. You just think your family, you want to make your brothers proud of you. Then your students, you want your students to feel like they're inspired. But, life took me in some twists and turns that opportunities landed before me that I would have never considered. And I didn't look for them. They just landed there. So I believe that the purpose is starting to unfold and reveal itself slowly over time.
So I told you I kind of did my little research on you. I did.
You're too sweet.
So tell me, because you have done research.
Yes.
Amazing research. So tell me how you started.
It landed, I'm telling you, I did not look for it. So I graduated, and I was just very content being, earning.
You graduated from
my doctorate program.
Okay. How did you, before going to that little story,
sure.
how did you get to that point? Like what did you tell yourself, like, I'm going to pursue my PhD?
Oh gosh, I never would have thought that I would have pursued that. I'm so glad you asked that question, because this is part of taking inventory, right? So I was teaching, and at the time I had finished my master's at Bank Street College, and my professor asked me to be an assistant for the course. I'm like, okay, I like this. And then the next semester, they said, oh, we need someone to teach a course. No one wants to do it. It's the summer semester. I said, oh, I'll do it. So I did it. And so they had at the time a contract with AmeriCorps, which is kind of like the Peace Corps, but AmeriCorps. And they had a program, the Corporation for National Service, that partnered with that university. And they would get consultants from the university to go and to be like motivational speakers and do these workshops, literacy workshops, because remember, Bank Street College, very progressive university. So they asked me, we need someone to fill in the slot. Can you go? So I went, and it was in Alabama. And I thought, gosh, what is this Bronx girl doing in Alabama? And so it turns out that it was actually at the Tuskegee Conference Center. They had gotten a core of regional volunteers that came from different parts of Alabama to be literacy volunteers. So they were teaching these leaders how to get other volunteers to improve the literacy in these very impoverished communities. So I thought, my goodness, here I'm a teacher dealing with small kids, and now that I'm doing this, I don't belong here, So that whole thing of, oh gosh, I'm not worthy enough. But I'm glad I pushed through. I had no choice. Right?
Yeah.
They sent me. I'm there. And the journey there was a whole other kit and caboodle. But all I'll tell you is that in the end, I walked away and I got bit. I realized I really got to think about making a bigger impact. And so during my summers and my springtime vacations, I would do these trainings across the country: Atlanta, Virginia, Florida, Massachusetts. And I would show up and I would do the trainings, and I helped to create some of the curriculum. And I realized that here I was making all this impact, but when I would come to my district, I felt like I was only in my classroom. So then I applied for a position as an instructional leader for math. It was the first time they had done anything like that in the district. So I'm glad I did it, because in the end I discovered that there was a lot of educational policy that I did not know about. There was a lot of things behind the scenes that were just so bureaucratically entrenched that you could not move. And I realized that I needed to go into pursuing a degree that would help inform, hopefully, educational policy. And that's when I chose to do my doctorate, focusing on how math is a civil rights, how our poor children who do not get quality math education get their future venues to careers totally sealed off because they can't get into the sciences, into the math, or the technology positions. So I realized that at that point I needed to pursue this doctorate. So I was just very happy getting my PhD to improve focusing on education. And then I was approached by, at the time, one of my advisors, who said we need someone to do, as a part of Social Changers Without Borders, they need someone to, a researcher to join their team. They're going to Kenya and they're working with child brides. I thought, I know nothing about child brides. I know nothing about the Kenyan, and they were like with an indigenous tribe, the Maasai. I'm like, what am I doing? They were like, well, we need an evaluator, and you come highly recommended. I'm going, who recommended me? So it turns out it was a couple of people, and I decided to do it.
So you went to Kenya.
I went to Kenya, and I was in the Rift Valley and all way deep there. First we went to Nairobi, and what I didn't know was that program evaluation of a woman who had received this huge grant from the UN to support these young girls. What I didn't know was that the results or the findings of that research were going to be presented to a commission for the United Nations to be able to grant her more money and to emulate that program at different parts of Kenya or wherever there were any situations where there were child brides.
Yes.
So it was a seed for policy. It was a seed for making change. So my intention, that way back that I said I wanted to make a contribution, I'm thinking in my own little world, in my district, in my small community, and it ended up blowing out of to this next exponential level of making a difference for young girls in Kenya.
And when they told you that it was in Kenya, I mean, just like, for instance, me,
Yes.
and I'm just thinking about me or any other, yes, I want to try to make a difference, but you're talking about a whole different, environment. So how did you accept or tell yourself, like, I'm going to do this, of course, I'm going to go to Kenya, and what did you have to work yourself up to it?
I had to work myself. First, I had to convince my partner at the time that we were in the fray. We were already was falling apart. That I had to do this, so I did it. And at that point, he wasn't convinced, so I did it. I said, I'm doing it anyway. So I had to kind of get my mindset ready, that I was ready to do this. That the reason why they chose me is because I'm outside of the culture, and that I could play I could be impartial. I could be just a true researcher observer. The hardest part was when I'm there, the language barrier. So we had a translator who spoke, Swahili and English, because in Kenya they were settled by the British. So English is a business language. So that helped. But it was very hard hearing the stories of these girls. And What I never knew was about female genital mutilation. And these girls were being prepared for marriage through that horrific act of mutilating their genitalia in preparation for marriage. So here I am. I mean, this was it. I'm sitting there taking notes, doing interviews, and these girls are telling their story. And I have to suspend all subjectivity, and I have to really be present and just hear their stories. And that's when I was thrown in. I mean, you can't get more horrific than that. And I realized that still these girls were they were being rescued to go to a girls' refuge shelter so they can go to school. Because at 10 years old, they're married off.
Yeah.
So they had to make a choice. Many of them were running. They ran away, and they did not want to be mutilated. Some of them ran away after being mutilated because they heard about a refuge shelter that this woman had gotten the grant for. So we were trying to justify that there's a need, but it was such a cultural practice that how do you educate? And so educational programs, it was a rite of passage. We had to find ways to communicate and help local communities understand that this rite of passage in this modern time could take a different form.
Yes.
So that the girls, could wait to be married, right? Or wait to be married off. So, that they would be more advantageous for their communities economically if they waited.
Yeah.
Let the girls go to school, come back, and then get married, but then have a different rite of passage. But it's very hard because here, as European, as Americans going into this community, telling them about their community, not easy.
No.
But
people don't like change,
no,
especially if they've
like
been doing it for such a long time.
Yeah. So I was called a Mzungu. That means a white person.
Oh.
And I just kept saying, wait a minute, I'm Puerto Rican and I'm from Puerto Rico. And I would draw pictures. See this? This is the United States. See this little island?
That's where I'm from.
That's where I'm from. I'm not a Mzungu. But, but in the end, I think about how, I didn't expect that. I didn't belong there. But I embraced it. And I'm glad I did because that was the seed for my humanitarian research journey. That was the first one. And then thereafter, things just took on another form.
And what was your next?
It was a well project in Nigeria, and children were not going to school because they were collecting water. I know, could you imagine not going to school to get water to go to their community, and so because they needed them, children worked. So child labor was very real. And so the director of the nonprofit organization that was commissioned to do the work in Kenya, asked me if I can help her with that project. So I did, and I'm glad I did. It's interesting, the politics and the bureaucracy and everything that comes thereafter, but it made me strong. I realized if I can function outside of this, then, and I can try to make an impact in a foreign community, then I need to go back and make a difference in my home community.
So let me ask you, because during your research, you were still a teacher.
I was still a teacher.
So
yeah.
When did you find the time?
It was my summers and anytime there was a break. February break, the holidays.
Okay.
And like I said, my marriage was over. So I was very happy to get away and to work on this research. But I will say that by the time the third project came in, divorce was already settled, and I went to Morocco, and I joined an organization, Cross-Cultural Solutions, where a part of your time that you travel, you get to learn the culture, but then the other half or portion of the time you're there is to make a difference, to volunteer, to do work. So I volunteered in a local hospital that treated cancer patients, young children.
Oh.
So, and that planted a seed because I had other people who were going to other volunteer posts, and they were talking about the street kids and the abandoned children. And at the time,
in Morocco,
I had just finished that work in Kenya, and a year or 2 years back, I said, wow, I would love to do some research about street children. So I approached the director of the program there and said, can I come back? and I got a team, and I learned a little Arabic. But it's bad.
What does that mean?
It means I speak a little Arabic. That's about it. And la 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 la, which means no. I kept saying no a lot, especially when you go to the market trying to sell you stuff. No, no, la la. But in the end, though, I'm glad everything just kind of came together. And then I came back from a trip, and there was another friend who recommended a contact, and I ended up going to Guatemala for the same thing, orphan children, abandoned street children. And so it kind of took on a whole new form.
Nice.
That's in terms of children, women and children.
And was that I think I read also that you did research in the Dominican Republic.
Yes.
So tell me a little bit about that.
That was more of a personal project.
Okay.
My mom passed away of cancer in 2012. And domestic violence was our reality. She was a battered woman for 27 years. And I just felt that, going back to the resilience part, I think that I wanted to make a contribution in her name. And I felt that in order to kind of make some meaning out of her life, some meaning, some purpose for all of that, I wanted to do a project that kind of commemorated what she went through. And I wanted to do it in Puerto Rico, but it was too close. Puerto Rico was too close. So my best friend at the time, who was a UN delegate, I'm sorry, I'm having a moment here. She worked in the UN, a consulate, and she had great contacts. And she said, Vilma, if you want to do a project, domestic violence is an issue everywhere, but it's extremely prevalent in the Dominican Republic. Would you be interested? My husband is working on a project there in his community, and you guys can partner up. And I'm glad I did, because that was my first domestic violence project that I did. So we did what we call an economic empowerment project. We went there, and to try to give women options, we decided to survey, well, what are the obstacles for women leaving, right? A situation of domestic violence and leaving their batterer. And it turns out that economics is the big game changer. And so we did a project where we collected monies from a circle of friends, and we purchased sewing machines. And we did different, we went to different community posts, community programs, and we pretty much got the women to, agree that if they got this sewing machine, that they had to train a team of women so that they can do different projects. So initially it was with the intention of making school uniforms.
But these women were battered women.
But they were battered women, and they had to be a network, right? So, because they were the same participants that were in my research that I was getting all their findings from.
Yeah.
Describing the scenario, what's going on, how did it happen, and there were some common themes that were coming through in all the findings, and mostly, it's because many of these women saw their mothers battered. So right there, I was really surprised that I broke away from that. But another part of it too was that culturally it was almost accepted. People just, you just don't get involved in people's relationships. And there's other issues too in terms of the men. We talked about rejection before, but men who, and I know this is going to sound very radical, but men that are batterers are dealing with their own rejection. It turns out that many times they feel that they're not ready, and so the fact that they may not make enough money, they may not have the resources, so they start drinking, and then once they start drinking, that distorts everything in their relationship. So they run to addiction. So addiction masks their pain, but in the end, there's a power dynamic struggle. They're trying to get control in their marriage because they can't bring anything else to the table, so they're going to control. So they're going to manage their women. They're going to manage that home. They're going to manage that situation. So that project really revealed a lot of, maybe made sense for me why my mother stayed so long. So yes, it was a research project, but in the end, I walked away learning more about myself and my home situation, and why my mother stayed the way she did. But I will say that that project was another seed project because it took on another form. So the following year I went back and I realized that these women were extremely resilient. They were able to, many of them did not leave, they stayed.
Did they say why they stood?
They stayed for their children, similar theme. They stayed because the opportunities were very limited. They stayed because
that's all they know.
Not only that, shame is huge. You left, you left the family, you left, and you have to understand, batterers are great manipulators. They know how to manage. So shame was the other issue. But they made it work somehow. They ended up, using, like, instead of school uniforms, they were using the sewing machines for quinceañeras, and they were renting out the machines. I was like, but wait, no, they're not supposed to be renting them out. But they rented out the machines, and it was a revenue builder. We would make arrangements with local merchants to give them space to be able to showcase their work. They're like, no, we don't need that. We're using Facebook now. I'm like, what? So, here I was still trying. So I learned that no matter how well intended you are in trying to make a difference, the people that you're there to serve have to make it their own. And in the end, these women made it their own. Some women left. Some women broke away, and some of them actually came to the United States seeking asylum. And that's when that took on another form for me, because because I was doing this research footprint, I would get calls from these, advocacy centers saying, we have a woman who is seeking asylum, and she's in Massachusetts, and she was the wife of, of a police officer over there in DR, and we're trying to make a case why she can't go back. And I said, well, I have my research from what I did, maybe I can pull something together. And I still have my original contacts from, that networking in DR. I spoke to former prosecutors, I spoke to advocates over there, and I realized, wow, this is still manifesting here in the United States.
Yeah.
So I every time I would get called, I'm like, how did they find me? And again, I'm not looking for it. It's coming to me. Yeah. And that's it's written. That's the purpose. I was not, it's supposed to happen that way.
Now let me ask you this question, and you may not necessarily know the answer to this question, but do you feel that, so in the Dominican Republic, you have I don't know what the percentage is of the women now, the battered women, but do you feel that that society or even the government plays a part in the acceptance of, women getting domestic violence in the home?
Yeah, that I have to say, it is and we're going to frame it as a phenomena, right? Because a phenomena, you have a hard time being able to pin it down. And if it were pinnable, right? If you were able to really lock in what are the actual, shaping forces and how we can solve it, then we wouldn't have it, right? So it is a phenomena at this point that a little bit of an anomaly, that even though there are presidents in place who, presidencies have changed in the Dominican Republic, it still hasn't changed. You would have a first lady say that that's her cause, her charge. It tends being that, something that I've noticed with the domestic violence is that there are a couple of things that we have to try to understand. We have to understand the plight of the men. Why is this continue to perpetuate? They were young boys that saw their mothers being abused, and so what happens? We will replicate what we have seen, right? It's imprinted. So that's one part of it. The other part is that women are now, because of the development of the nation, are the earners. So they're the money earners if they're like working at any of the resorts. Men have the highest level of unemployment there in the Dominican Republic.
Really? I didn't know that.
The same thing in Puerto Rico. The same thing in Puerto Rico. So what happens? The man comes home, they're not earning, and the woman is imploring, well, ¿dónde está el dinero? Where's the money? And then right there, right, instead of sitting down, having a conversation, problem solving together, I'm not making the men as a victim. What I'm saying is I'm describing what are the different situations that contribute to this phenomena to continue to perpetuate. And so economics is the number one thing that is, so when you're dealing with deprivation, when you're dealing with a financial need, that right there, that's the deal breaker. If we can somehow create a thriving economy, jobs, training, education, that right there will address a big bulk of the problem. The other piece is societal. There are a little bit of cultural norms where it's just accepted, we don't get involved, that's the man, he has to, and get your woman in check. She's not behaving, I cannot believe she spoke out of turn. There's still some cultural norms that we in the machismo culture, in the Latino culture, are still trying to negotiate. No matter how progressive we are, even generations removed, we're still dealing with some of that. And thirdly, I think that a big part of it is education. It's speaking out and saying, I will not accept this.
Yes.
And rejecting that this is going to be my situation. I think that as the woman, as a daughter of a mother who was battered, I made a decision to not be in a relationship like that. I thought, physically he's not beating me up. What I didn't realize was that I was in a relationship that was still extremely domineering. I was in a relationship where many decisions were being made for me because they were for my own good. So I was the silent partner in the relationship, and I allowed that because I was almost in a way very silently kind of accepting that this is the way it's supposed to be. Yeah. Right? So finding, activating agency in young girls, being able for them to use their voices, to be able to communicate, use their words to talk, to share how they feel, to set boundaries, to say, no, I do not want this. And finding ways to encourage that, I think, will help to break the vicious cycle of domestic violence in any community.
Yeah.
In any community.
Well, I think also, a lot of it stems to our upbringings in infancy, and
Yes.
how your parents treat you, what you see, you understand. So it also, yes, economics plays a role, society, but the home too, whatever we see.
Good
You
point.
understand.
Yes.
And not many people can actually break away.
Right.
Not many people can break away. That's what they know, that's their norm, and that's what they will continue and pass on.
And how do we change that?
Yes.
Well, I have to say, my sister island of the Dominican Republic ended up being like that first ground for domestic violence research, and then my personal project came in 2015, where I decided to fix my mom's home and try to make like a bit of a cultural center
in Puerto
Rico, part-time, it wouldn't be full-time, where I would invite local women and try to create some cultural arts and trying to understand, the el poder de la mujer, and trying to empower young girls. And so that's when I decided to do a documentary project telling my mother's story and how her daughter is trying to change that and make a contribution and bring it forward. But life happens, right? You have had Hurricane Maria come by. I had personal illness that I was battling with, and then we have COVID. Yeah. So I've had a major setback, but I am not giving up. We're right now this summer going to wrap a bow on that project and finish our interviews. We got to visit different shelters, women's shelters in Puerto Rico, spoke with different advocates, learning some of the same questions you posed. How is it we can help these women? How is it? And they shared their field experience. They shared the stories of these women and helped us kind of wrap our brains around, what programs can we put forward that are going to help break that cycle.
That's awesome. So that's your little project that you're almost finishing up.
Almost done, yes, almost done. Yes. It's hard because, I personally financed this. I refused to go with a grant because I felt that I was going to lose voice or agency behind it. And here's the thing, when you're personally vested in this passion project, you have agency, but at the same time, you get to choose who you want to bring in the fold.
Yes.
You get to choose how you want to tell the story. And I needed to, and you get to choose how long it takes. I think that we're in a situation right now where everything is about quantitative, the numbers and the time and efficiency. And I think that if I was supported by a grant after Hurricane Maria, they would have dropped me. They would have said, listen, we need a product.
Yeah.
So all of that is going to come together, and my goal is to sell it to a foundation that is going to work with social workers to try to help train them to understand this phenomenon. And the goal is to be able to outsource it as a curriculum. So the interviews and the workshops, curriculum will all come together to, create change.
That's awesome. So why don't you tell me a little bit about Vilma today?
Ooh, Vilma today. Vilma today is getting off the hamster wheel a little bit. I'm dialing back the research work. I'm really taking personal inventory about the next phase of my life. I'm very close to retiring from my profession as a teacher. And at this point, I'm just, Vilma today is being a little selfish right now.
You're working on you.
I'm working on me. And I'm glad I am because, right, if we're saying that we want to make a difference, we have to take care of this vessel, right?
That is true.
We have to take, self-care is important. So the way I've developed resilience, and I would say even through this whole situation with our public health crisis, has been seeking self-wellness, seeking time to be alone, to reflect, seeking time to kind of keep the world out a little bit so that I can just get a pulse of what is it that I want to do next.
Yeah.
And that requires a little solitude. It requires, and I embrace the solitude.
And this is great because this we're in her house, by the way, which is beautiful.
Thank you.
And I feel like this place you can get that. You can get that solitude.
Yes.
You're by the beach. That's awesome, no? And you love the water.
I love the water.
You
The water, I think, is representative of our different states. So sometimes the water can be turbulent, and our lives are turbulent. And sometimes the waters are still, and that still is that calmness. But sometimes that still can feel a little eerie because we say to ourselves, nothing's happening, right? Oh, what's going on? And so we have to be able to kind of accept all the different states of that water. Sometimes it's frozen and nothing's happening,
yeah.
Right? Really nothing. You're locked in. So I think this place represents a space for me to continue growing. I'm gonna stick with the plan. The plan is whatever came to me because it was written. So I'm right now I'm not actively seeking anything.
Yeah.
I have been working on my memoir, where I'm talking about how all of those life experiences of hurts and traumas and pain, how all of that, in the end, helped me become the advocate that I am today. And I'm hoping that it will make a difference to other people who felt that, they have this desire to help and make a difference, but they just may not know how to begin. So I'm hoping that my story can inspire that and can help
I
our
think
girls.
it will. I think definitely it will. But let me ask you, before we wrap it up, I do have to ask you, what would you recommend to a woman that's out there, even a woman in domestic violence, or any woman that's going through a certain obstacle, rejection, or failure? What would you recommend to that woman so that she is able to get out of that failure or be able to even move past it. I mean, ultimately, I feel that our failure is our biggest success.
Right.
You know?
Yes.
So what's your recommendation?
I'm glad you said that, because failure, rejection, right, is your biggest success, but it's extremely painful.
It is.
And psychologists have done MRIs where they have looked at the brain in a moment of pain and receiving news about rejection, and it's lighting up the same receptors. So that means that we register rejection as pain. So women that are in a position where they're stuck, are the biggest, scariest thing is rejection. So why would you embrace, right, what scares you? But what we want to encourage these women to understand that on the other side of that rejection is you get in the canoe again and you just keep moving forward. You don't give up. I think that the thing that scares me the most is even now, right? Like I said, I'm going to wait for it to come to me. I'm not ready to go to it. That's a little part of me still, right? Sitting with rejection. I don't want to still take the rest. So I still don't want to go out there. But I encourage women to listen to their inside voice, that intuition, that gut. It doesn't lie to you. And what we've done is we have almost conditioned ourselves not to feel. We do everything not to feel. We're afraid of feeling. And you need to continue feeling. Listen to yourself. If something doesn't feel right, trust it. It's not supposed to be that way. It should be natural and it should flow. A career change should flow. A relationship change should flow. It flows. And if it doesn't, stop, take note, and ask yourself why. More than likely, rejection is a part of it. You're either rejecting the fact that something is not for you and you're just like, okay, we're good, or maybe someone's rejecting you because you're not good for them. And you got to be okay. You can't demonize a person. You can't demoralize the other person. You have to just accept it and keep moving forward. So I'm hoping our girls and our women, they keep moving forward and listen to that inside voice. And the last thing to do when you feel rejected is you want to mask that rejection. So many people will drink, many people will take drugs, many people will do things to distract themselves from having to deal with the reality of that rejection. Stand in it, receive it, and in the end, you'll know that you're a survivor and you can get past it.
That's awesome, and thank you, because I think that that's a great advice, very great advice. So I want to thank you again.
Thank you, Ruth,
for
having
coming.
me.
Oh my goodness, it was an honor to have you on my show, and thank you so much for accepting. I think that you've given so much information, and I think that
maybe too much.
No.
I didn't tell you about the Nigerian chief who tried to corner me. That's another story.
Okay, I gotta get you on here again another time, but I know we gotta wrap it up.
Trying to marry me off. I'm joking.
Funny.
But
Thank you so much
levity and laughter and being
yes.
able to just receive the moment. So thank you, Ruth, for receiving my story.
Oh, thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
Okay.